Hi everyone, Heather here with the California Afterschool Network, and I'm joined by Michael Funk from the California Department of Education for our Fireside Chat number 12. With some very exciting news. Hopefully by now you have all heard that the budget has been signed by passed by the legislature and signed by the governor last night. So we are here today to just talk a little bit about that and give you some brief updates. And then we'll, of course, in coming weeks, talk more about what that means. So first, I just want to say thank you to all of you for all of your advocacy efforts. It really paid off to have your voices lifted up to talk about how essential these programs are for our students and our communities and our families. And so thank you all for everything you have been doing over the last few months to really engage in that conversation. And thank you to the legislature for really championing after school, expanded learning, and how essential these programs are. And thank you to the governor for signing that budget that they put forward. So with that, just going into a little bit of the details. So last night, AB 89 was signed into as our budget. So that's kind of Budget Bill Junior. And Section 71 is the one that talks about the ACES funding, and basically in the May revise, where there was proposed that ACES would not receive the $100 million allocation that we have in the past, that was put back in the budget. So long story short, there's a lot of different technical words in ed code, but what that means is that at the end of the day, the grant amounts and the daily rates that we had in place for fiscal year 1920 will remain in place for fiscal year 2021. So all the grant amounts will be the same in this coming year. Along with the actual budget bill, there are budget trailer bills, which we talked a little bit in our last fireside chat. We talked about AB 77. Michael, you went into some detail about that. SB 98 is actually the official budget trailer bill that was signed. So I'm hoping you can share a little bit about the budget trailer bill.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. Well, hi, everyone. It's a great day after a lot of work from all across the state and here in Sacramento. Technically, at the end of the day, there were two identical trailer bills. One was that we referenced back on June 16th was AB 77. SB 98 was the Senate version. They were identical. And at the end of the day, it was a Senate version that was passed on the Senate floor yesterday, and after passing through the assembly last week, and then signed by the governor last night. So back in June 16th, I went through great detail and walked through each provision of the trailer bill and said that this is language that we have submitted to be included in the trailer bill. And I want to say we're thrilled to say that everything that we asked for is in the bill and is now law. So these portions of Education Code, it states that the Department of Education may waive the following provisions. All the provisions I read last week, I'm not going to go through in great detail and read them again. But what I want to celebrate is over the last several weeks, we've had a lot of requests saying we're not sure what we're going to be allowed to do in the fall. I've encouraged you to get a seat at the table in planning. And I've said, assume you've got the flexibility you need, go into planning, and then tell us what you need. And from all over the state, we received emails stating specifically what type of flexibility you need from the current rules in Ed Code. And that's what we submitted, and that's what we have. So a great process with a great result. And we are working on a specific guidance document that we're hoping to release next week, working to release next week, which specifically lays out what's in the trailer bill. And next week, we will do a fireside chat with that guidance document, even if it's not final. We'll tell you what the direction it's going. And we will be bringing on program providers, at various times in the next few weeks from across the state who will talk specifically about what they've designed and how that relates to the trailer bill. So not only will you have the trailer bill language, which by the way is section 97 of SB 98, section 97, but you will have a guidance document that gives more detail, and then we'll be bringing you examples of what this looks like in real life. So with all that, we're hoping, now that we have the flexibility, the work really starts, because with great flexibility comes a lot of questions, and we're anticipating that you'll have a lot of questions, and working with our entire system of support for expanded learning, our county office partners, our own CDE staff, California Afterschool Network, ASAP Connect, all of us calibrating, working together so you can get the guidance that you need with any kind of question. So with that, just to reiterate, both the assets, ACEs, and the 21st Century Elementary and Middle School grants, the grant reduction process is suspended for the school year 2021. That's important because otherwise, if you wouldn't have hit certain attendance thresholds, you would have had a grant reduction. And now with likely lower ratios, student and instructor ratios, it would be very difficult to meet your numbers. So there's no concern there. And I know the other thing, the hours of operation, which was the core of the executive order and also this trailer bill, the programs may operate at any time of the day. So that specific language was waived. Same thing with before school programs, and also the ratio of 20-1 has been waived. You could have always had a smaller ratio, but either way, the ratio of 21 is now suspended. And that's the heart of it, but we'll go into more detail later. Now, some of you have asked, the trailer bill doesn't specifically call out 21st Century Elementary and Middle. It just calls out ACEs and assets, which is our high school program. So what we'll also cover in the guidance is that there is a provision of education code in 8484.75. Look it up for your fun evening, 8484.8, which specifically says 21st Century will mirror these sections of the ACEs Ed Code. And there's a longer history as to why that language was put in back in 2002. But either way, the Ed Code that is waived for ACEs in the trailer bill is also waived for elementary and middle 21st century. So we'll make sure you have the references. It can map that all out. And I think, it's a great day to celebrate that the value of your work, the value of your contribution to the well-being of children, families, and communities, and the importance and the essential nature of the expanded learning, and more importantly, the people that are working in expanded learning has been recognized by the legislature and the governor and many other leaders across the state. And we now have a full endorsement with flexibility to move forward and really step up and be part of what can be a great role for expanded learning in the reopening of schools and in the summer. So I'll pause there. Just know there's going to be a lot more coming, a lot more detail, and we're working on that right now.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And I know some of the questions have already been rolling in, and a couple just before we finish up that I wanted to mention and see if you had thoughts on those already. One, we've had a few questions about waivers. So it says these provisions may be waived. So I know people have been asking about if there's going to be waivers, what the waiver process might look like. And then a second question, you were talking about the flexibility of the hours. And so we know it's likely programs won't run a traditional 3-hour program anymore. So if they're running more hours or less hours, how does that impact the daily rate?
Yeah, so the question about waivers, there is a process with the state that a school district could apply to the State Board of Education for waivers for certain parts of Ed Code. And that's on a district by district or county office by county office basis. And that is not how this works. In this section, the CDE can waive the following parts of Ed Code, and then it's waived for everybody. So there's no application that you'll need to fill out or paperwork to get the waiver or get the waivers. The second thing is that this comes up a lot, and there is a provision in the Trader Bill that specific we haven't talked about. That specifically calls out that the department can prorate funding rates pursuant to the sections for programs that may operate more than 3 hours up to 6. That section wasn't entirely necessary because the other sections of education code that I've already mentioned that waive the hours requirement of the program when it starts and when it stops, and all those other things that we've mentioned that are waived basically means your grant amount is your grant amount. There's no additional funding to give more money if you run a longer program or anything like that. And we'll go into detail with that into the guidance document. But for so many years, you've all just been wired to think about, okay, if I'm running like for our summer programs, well, we have a choice to run a 3-hour or a 6-hour program. And we've said that if you're running a 6-hour program, you only have to serve half as many children because it's the equivalent of serving the same child for 6 hours is the equivalent of serving one child for 3 and one child for 3. And so we're getting those kind of questions. So if we operate more than 3 hours, do we have to serve the same amount of children? And once again, these waivers will not require you to meet at a certain attendance benchmark to retain your grant. Does that mean, so then people will say, well, do we have to turn in attendance? All that's going to be in the guidance. And yes, we're going to require record keeping. We're going to require a record of students that you serve that will have to be turned in to the department. But it's not going to be used to calculate a grant reduction or whether you keep your grant amount. So with that, I know there's going to be maybe a lot more questions, but the grant amount that you will receive is the amount of money you have to work with. And how that gets structured, obviously, if you serve a lot of hours, a lot more than 3 or 4 or 5 hours, then you're going to end up serving less children or less days. I mean, so it's all complicated, and we'll try to figure it out and get more guidance to you.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Yes, so a lot of questions coming. We'll dig into the guidance and, as you mentioned earlier, have program providers come on to talk about how they're thinking about navigating all of this. So as we wrap up in closing, I just want to say again how much we really appreciate everyone and their work to get here. This is very much we're celebrating, so we hope you all do celebrate and enjoy this huge win today. And I do want to note that this also does not end our advocacy. We need to continue to stay engaged in advocacy at the state level, but also at the local and the federal level. We still need more federal stimulus funds to support education. There's a lot of budget decisions that happen at the local level, so I encourage all of you to stay connected in those different ways. Cam sent out our newsletter this morning that had a couple bullet points of how to engage that way, and we'll continue to share different ways to get engaged. So really want to encourage folks, don't stop the momentum today, keep building on it. And so with that, Michael, I'll turn it over to you for any closing words.
Well, I just want to say, even in answering the questions I did, wait for what comes out into writing, because that's where you're going to get the clearest guidance, and that's where we can be the most precise. So I'm trying to explain things the best I can in this moment, but wait for things to come out in writing. So but the real close I want to give is, with great flexibility comes great responsibility. And you are not offered this flexibility so that you can do less and still retain your grant. The work that we've been working on so hard for months to respond to your request to get this flexibility signed into law for this next school year is so you can do more, is so you can step up and do all you can to serve our children. Our children, our students, they deserve our best, and they deserve all we can give. And so do not take this flexibility as a time to take your foot off the throttle and just take a breath. This is the time to lean in and the time for our work to really start. So with that, as I always say, lead with love to get to learning. Let's love our children, and we'll see you next week on the next chat. Thank you, Heather.